Good morning, my friends. This is Breakfast with the Fat Man. I normally don't buy the generic stuff off the shelves. And sometimes we see a price and you think, okay, I'm going to buy something to see how it is. And I have mixed opinions on it. I think sometimes you're just better off spending the extra dollar for something you know you're going to like. This one here is okay, I guess. It'll fill you. And if you're used to it, then it's not a problem, right? One of those things that rumbling through my head here over the last couple weeks is, this is something I bring up in a lot of my revisits when I'm revisiting Ironcrown Enterprises Middle Earth campaign materials, game books, source books, modules, and in some cases other game stuff. It occurs, and I say there's so much good material in here that's ubiquitously bland or it's generic. And what I mean by that is that aside from the mechanics, set the rule mechanics aside, the style of the dice, the modifications, modifiers, what have you, and just look at the source material itself, the storyline material. And most of it is adaptable to any campaign, any game system to some degree, depending on what you're doing. I can tell you that I have used, as I'll throw this one out here, I have used this, believe it or not. This is Agmar, the Kingdom of the Witch King. I have used the source material, broken down in individual pieces, this town, that village, this terrain, this fortification, this fortress, in other game systems. Stuff of my own creating and for other games that I've played based off of other game systems, right? It doesn't matter because I'll use the mechanics from that game system to perpetrate the play, and I'll use the wordage, the verbiage, the setting from this one, and it works, right? Now, oddly enough, or surprisingly enough, I have actually used several of these in space opera campaigns over the decades, and in Star Wars. What do you mean Star Wars? Star Wars is fun. How do you have Star Wars and a hack attack, a fantasy setting, and blah 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 blah. Well, now think about it for a minute. Look at any of the movies, look at any, especially look at the cartoon series. I've been chewing my way through the Clone Wars a little at a time on my phone, and you see it over and over and over again, where you get this melding of technology and organic material. You go into a culture. Why would an advanced, galactically speaking, advanced society, advanced race of a collection of races utilize uh, animals to draw carts? Now I'm going to have a cart that's anti-grav. It floats, so it doesn't have wheels. But I'm going to use a local beastie to pull it. Well, what's the point of that? It's a machine, so the machine still needs power. It still needs to repaired and maintained. So you know that's because A, that's intelligent use of things. B, it shows many, many, many years of, literally tens of millennia of history there and a cultural thing. So, in that aspect, it's not hard to go to, if I'm traveling in Star Wars and I go to some backwater primitive world, for me to grab a source book from one of my other primitive hack and slash game systems and utilize it for the setting. I'm not going to call it, the world of Agmar, though I could. Who's going to care? It's my game campaign. If my players are on board with it, and they see the humor in it, or they don't see the reference, then nobody's the wiser, right? But if I'm using a source book and everybody in there seems like they're from the Middle Ages, well, that's because they are, and it shows that time and time again in a science fiction space based kind of game system, you're going to find that kind of environment. Now, I could not use the book in, let's say, if I'm doing Shadowrun, because that's a completely different set of mechanics, storyline wise. I mean, there's no time travel involved here. Although it's possible to take NPCs and case by case locations out of this book and utilize it in a neo Gothic punk near modern game that this is, especially since magic also works in Shadowrun, right? Okay. Now, I'll even put a stretch in here. Some of you won't know what I'm referring to, so do your research. Twilight 2000, this post-apocalyptic World War III survivor game system where you are part of a small contingent of NATO forces stuck behind, more or less stuck in Poland, and when everything's gone south and it's literally falling apart, now it's everybody for themselves, more or less, and you got to make your way home. Well, you're going to have to travel through quite a few areas of Eastern and Middle Europe and parts of Western Europe. And what do you find? You find huge ancient cultures that have lots of castles and ruins of castles and fortifications and things like this that go back to their Middle Ages. So, pulling out a castle diagram from one of these books and the floor layout is still viable. Am I wrong? Am I delusional in my thinking in that aspect? I'm just, there's just several examples of this. It is something to keep in mind when you're setting up what you're going to do for your campaign. Time for a lot of us is precious. We don't have, huge blocks of time to sit down and ink out every little detail we like to do and make it all original. I mean, we just don't. And if you do, well, God bless you, and I'm glad you do. And I wish you were my GM, But I've been on both sides of that block. I can honestly say I've had at points where I were, between jobs, if you will, and had gobs and gobs and gobs of time on my hand, and I wasn't that I was either, self motivated or just needed to keep busy. So, yes. And then there are times where it just doesn't feel like there's enough hours in the day to do everything that's required between work and family and living or just living the day. So when you got the opportunity to take the lazy way out, the smart way out is to utilize these things. After all, why spend so much money to collect all this stuff if you don't take advantage of the fact that you have a vast repertoire of tools and material, a vast set of source book material to utilize in pretty much any game system you want to play? Keep that in the back of your head.